Hey guys, Andrew here. We're out here on a quiet road east of Austin. Gonna do a little astrophotography. So I don't know if you can see it because this camera is not very good. I certainly can't because I blinded the crap out of myself with the headlights. But there is a nice little barn. We're on the side of the road. We're on public property. It's on public view. So we're allowed to photograph it. So my original plan had been to show you how to make a Startrail like this using a not too glamorous camera. It's my old D5000. Pretty old. Definitely not known for its low light capabilities these days. But as you can see, I forgot to get a battery out. So we're going to do it using my normal standby D3S. Just trust me, you could do it with a kit lens and a D5000 just as well. So we're going to set that up, and I'll be back in a second. Okay, so we've got tripod, good head, camera, 1424 on there right now, but you could shoot with, as I said, I was going to shoot this with the D5000, except I forgot the yield additional battery. So with this camera, what I'm going to do, I'm going to connect a remote. This is a simple switch here. Just a button, nothing complicated about it. And I like to take a Velcro tie strap and attach it to the leg of the tripod so that wind doesn't cause it to blow around. The second thing I'm going to use, because it's fairly cold out here tonight, I've got a external power supply. Basically bought an off-the-shelf power supply to get the connector. Once I had that, cut it off, put it on a DC to DC power supply, so I have to hook it up to a 12 volt, basically a UPS battery, which allows me to power the camera for what basically amounts to an indefinite period of time. Plugged in. UPS battery. So once I do that, there's no battery indicator on here, which tells me that it's being powered externally. So now we're going to work on the setup for the camera. So as a good base, before I go do anything, before I take any test shots, what I usually do is I'll start at 1600 and somewhere in the f4 range is usually good, and then 30 seconds. So I'm shooting on manual. So ISO 1600, f4, 30 seconds, good starting place. So now we're going to go frame the shot we want and take a couple test shots. Okay, so I've got the camera in position, got a shot framed up, battery, camera, down low, focused on this pole right here using a headlamp and autofocus. Got, this is my intervalometer out here. Since I'm using the big camera, might as well use it. Otherwise, the camera's in manual, 30 second. We're going to change that. Go to bulb mode, F4. Let's see if I can do this with one hand. ISO 800 right now. So the results from 30-second exposure look about like that, right there. So now, all that's really left to do, see if I have hands I can use here at one time, is to set up the intervalometer, which I do via my phone and Bluetooth, and launch off. And you'll hear the click. There it goes. So now that's just going to run for a while. So now that I'm back in the truck, a little bit more controlled situation, not trying to juggle a camera and a cell phone, I thought I would explain a couple things that I did out there. So I saw the camera sitting on the ground on the tripod. I have the intervalometer. I switched from 30 seconds to bulb mode. My intervalometer controls the length of the exposure, so I put the camera in bulb mode, which allows the remote to do that. The moon is up right now. We're almost to a quarter moon, which means the moon is almost half full in the sky, which means it's putting out quite a bit of light. And it's actually in my frame because I'm shooting towards the west. So that results in me needing to turn the exposure down quite a bit. So thus f4 about 30 seconds, ISO 800. There won't be nearly as many stars as if it was a dark sky. But the flip side of the coin is I can see the foreground, the fence, the grass, etc. a little bit better. In this case, since I'm shooting back towards North Austin, Round Rock, Georgetown, that area, there weren't going to be that many stars anyways, because there's quite a bit of light in the sky, even on a clear night like this. So I don't give up too much by having the moon in the sky. There's going to be one really, really bright streak, which will look like one big star. It'll actually be the moon. But otherwise, it doesn't really affect the Startrail all that much. So now it's just sitting out there running. I can check it by opening the door out of the truck, which I did just a second ago, and just listening for about 30 seconds. And sometime in that 30 seconds, you'll hear the shutter click as it cycles from one exposure to the next. The intervalometer that I use, their commercial one's available, like the Trigger Trap. I just set it to take 1,000 exposures because that's more than I know I want. I told it to take 30-second exposures. It's doing that. I told them to get as quickly as it possibly could. Now all I have to do is wait. And so that's what we're doing. So here we are in Affinity Photo, back at our desk. We've exported all the files from the raw processor from Capture One after doing essentially a very basic processing, export them with sharpening off. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going through these files one by one. If that sounds tedious, it is. And I'm removing sort of the obvious defects. Plane trails are the big one. You may see me in paint. I'm using the in paint brush. Some things that you can't see on your monitor because of the compression on the video, but there are little airplane trails everywhere. It's much, much harder to remove these from the finished product because our eye is so good at detecting defects in lines. One of the tricks I use is I will take a black paintbrush and I'll paint over things where it interferes with the background too much. This happens to work pretty well, especially in areas where there aren't many stars, because we're using a light and only type of stacking. So black areas are essentially masked out in any given frame. So what I'm doing here, you can in paint fill in the color, or if it interferes too much with the fence, for example, or a fence post, you can just paint it black, and that part of the frame won't show up. So now we just go through all the files. One of the things you'll come across, something I like to call a joker. So we were photographing the Startrail on the side of a road. Despite the fact that it was a dead-end road in the middle of nowhere, there was actually a lot more traffic than I had hoped. Car came through, completely blew out the foreground, got flare in the image. See all the white kind of fogginess? That's what happens when you shine a light into a wide-angle lens, many other lenses too. So this is the kind of frame you really can't save. No matter what you do with this, it's going to make the final result really strange. The light on the fence makes it look like it's been really over-sharpened. So what I tend to do in that is I just skip it. This is a different sort of joker. We didn't have quite as much light. It almost looks like it's been light painted intentionally. It hasn't, and I have decided I want the final result to look like it was silhouetted. I don't want it to be light painted. So I'm going to use the trick of just putting black over the areas that I don't want to show up in the stack. And because we're doing a light and only type of stacking, black in any given image results in those pixels not contributing at all to the final image. So I just kind of paint over everything that's got light on it, and then I'm done. Once you've gone through all the frames from your Startrail, we're going to go ahead and go into StarStax. So program's available for free for all major OSs. Load up all of our frames, the edited frames, and if you look through these, you can see, so there's a bunch of frames, I think about 300. See the moon moving around, particularly obvious, stars moving a little bit frame to frame. And you'll also notice in here little black dots and such as we flip through them showing frames that I've edited to remove things using black painting as a way of doing it. We're going to do a gap filling blending, which is a way of blending that it does a light and only blend and attempts to fill in the spaces between the stars caused by the gap between the frames. So even if your gap is very small, in my case a quarter second, there's still some dimming between frames. And so this will attempt to process that out. So now we just wait for it to go through all the frames. Okay, and once that's finished, we're going to go ahead and save it. And then head back over to Affinity. Okay, open that up. So now the first thing I like to do on any edit is to do a quick cleanup. Before I do that, I'm going to duplicate my original, name it original, name my duplicate cleaned, so that I have a way to come back and check what progress I've made, make sure I haven't messed anything up. So we're going to do a lot of work here with the inpainting brush because we can't sort of break the image like we could when we were doing the stacking. And I want to take out these sort of hot pixels. I want to take out some of these plane trails. So, inpainting does a pretty reasonable job of realizing the star trails are supposed to stay there and that the plane trails are supposed to go away. So just scroll around the image, look at various pieces, look for anything like that. There's a little bit of dust spot here and there. Take those out, just kind of even that background out so it doesn't look too obvious. Go ahead and save. Always good to do that. So now we've got a nice clean base version. So now that we've got a clean base, we're going to do a little frequency separation. It's one of my favorite techniques for cleaning up the stars. We're just going to do plain old frequency separation. And as you move the slider back and forth to the size of essentially the blur it's going to be applied, you can see some more of the detail ends up in the high frequency versus the low frequency. So I'm going to group my frequency separated layers and rename that group to cleaned again, because that's effectively the cleaned layer. So zoomed out, you can't really tell much difference when you turn the high frequency layer off, but I'm going to zoom in. Let's look at some stars. So high frequency off, high frequency on. So see how much sharper they get when they're on? And that tends to accentuate the noise and the gaps between them. So now we're going to go ahead and apply a little curve adjust to the entire low frequency layer. Really concentrate here on making sure the sky looks good. You can see when we turn that on, it kind of gets crunchy in the sky. So what I want to do is I want to mask in. Create a mask here. I'm going to work on the original layer. One of the things I've learned is you always want to, if you do frequency separation, you have to be careful when you create a mask using selection tools, because if you're not on a combined layer, you'll have trouble selecting, especially if you're on the high frequency layer. That does strange things because the layer is mostly gray. So we're going to go ahead and select, and as sort of always when we do this type of thing in Affinity, I'm not going to be too fiddly with the selection because we're going to refine it later on if necessary. The other thing is I know I'm using this selection just for high frequency, and so if it's not a very precise selection, it won't be too bad unless we copy and use it for something else, which we might down the road. So we'll try to get it close to start with. My goal with the frequency separation is to only apply that to the non-sky, to the ground, the silhouettes, etc. This curve adjust, which we did for the sky earlier, makes the ground almost completely black. So I think I'm going to duplicate this layer, and we'll invert the mask, put it onto the, there we go. So now we have some detail in the foreground, and the sky is got the curve adjust applied. So now, as I mentioned before, if you refine a mask or work on a selection on a high frequency layer, things get strange. So I'm going to drag it down, put it on the original, because it gives me a nice, clean, full-bodied sort of layer to work on, and then I'm going to refine it. And just clicking on refine did a reasonable job of cleaning up some of the edges. In fact, that looks pretty good, I think, from scrolling around. So now what we're going to do, since we refined that mask, we're going to go ahead and duplicate it. And we're going to replace our curve adjust mask, our inverted mask. Just delete that. Take our duplicated, one of our duplicated mask layers, drag it there. So it accepts it as a mask. Good. Drag the other. I'll go ahead and invert that first. Then drag the other up to the high frequency layer. And that mask is correct to start with, so it masks in the high frequency on the grass. And I find it helpful to rename these masks based on what they are. So this is a sky mask, and this is the ground mask in this flare. That allows us to sort of keep track of what's what later if we decide to use the mask again, which we're going to. So there's edited. So now let's play with a little bit of sharpening. We're going to use clarity to do that. You can see if we drag it back and forth, things get really crunchy versus not. This this adjustment is applied to the entire image. So I usually try to, if you turn it up too far, you get halos. I don't want halos. Of course, you can play with the blend mode. I'm not a big fan of that with clarity. So we're probably just going to leave that as normal. Okay, just added a little bit of sharpness. So let's play with the curve for the sky now that it's isolated. So once we've broken this apart, we have the ability to sort of tweak each area as we want. So how I want the sky to look. So to duplicate that, I'm going to invert the mask, which gives me essentially the ground mask. Apply a little tweak to the ground. We're going to play with the color. This will just be for the ground by playing with the saturation. We're seeing it globally now. I'll move the mask in a second. Forgot to rename this one to ground after I duplicated the sky. So rename that ground mask. Duplicate it and drag it on up to our HSL layer since we want it just to apply to the ground. So now I want to step back and take a look. Drag this clarity layer into my edits so that I can turn it on and off easily. There we go. So now, original, edited. So we have the opportunity here to just tweak a little bit more in terms of the curve adjusts and such we have in various places. So this is the ground, and I could go a couple different ways. The ground, I could go silhouette. Remains to be seen whether I like that or not. This is really by eye. There's no formula here. I'm just trying to get it to where it looks natural to me, and sort of grass tends to look in the moonlight like this. Looks really kind of flat. Just because the way it is. That looks pretty good. It's dark, but it's got some texture. Here's the finished photo. If you like what we're doing, go ahead and subscribe below. This is video 2. There'll be more to come in the future weeks. Thanks.